I'm in the library here of the head office of Mizrahi.
Amazing. So warm welcome again to everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening to an important event about banking for Olim in Israel. I'm glad to have you all here with us. Before we begin, I want to introduce you to Aviva Talor. Aviva is in charge of volunteerism and in charge of community events at Telfed. If during the event you can't hear, you can't see, please message Aviva. It says Telfed, and she will be happy to help you at any time. My name again is Teddy Saitovitz, so welcome to you all. I'm a volunteer at Telfed. And before we go on and introduce Marc, I want to also introduce our CEO, Doron Klein, who is joining us from a park in Tel Aviv on his way to the theater. And that's why we smiled about it. So Doron, before your show begins, please tell us a little bit about the organization behind these events. And we wish you well at the theater.
Thank you very much, Teddy. Toda rabah. And thank you to you and to Aviva for organizing another great event. And shalom to Marc. Marc, always great to work together.
Yeah, Doron, I will catch up with you. I will catch up with you later on as well. It'd be nice to see you again.
Marc and I go back many years. So, Aviva, if I can share screening abilities, please. That'd be great. And we're going to just be talking for a few minutes about the organization behind this evening, and that's Telfed. Let's go into the PowerPoint presentation. And as we say, a few words from the sponsor. Here we go, Telfed. So Telfed is our nickname from Tel Aviv Federation. And when were we in Tel Aviv? Well, in 1948, we were in Tel Aviv. And that's where we have our official name, South African Zionist Federation Israel. We got that name in 1948 when we were looking after the 800 Machal soldiers who came to volunteer in the War of Independence. So then the South African Zionist Federation set up Telfed in Tel Aviv. And since 1948, we've been looking after South African Olim. After the war, South African Zionist Federation said, you guys did a great job. You won the War of Independence, come back home. A lot of those 800 Machal volunteers wanted to stay. And since 1948, we've been operating in absorbing South African Aliyah. We still carry that name with pride, South African Zionist Federation, Israel. We're no longer part of the South African Zionist Federation, not for the last 40 years, but that's our history. But today, everybody knows us by our nickname, the Tel Aviv Federation, Telfed. Our mission. First from Israel, and yeah, you certainly know the quality of life, as I said, sitting in a park here in Tel Aviv at night with my laptop and my computer and not worried about it. That's part of the quality of life that Israel can offer. And we're also dealing with South Africans and Australians, right? For the last decade, we've also been helping Australian Klita. And we want our Olim to participate and contribute to Israeli society. We're not here to keep them in a bubble. And the last slide, each one of these squares relates to a Telfed staff member, together with a committee of volunteers. You can see we have 250 volunteers at Telfed. There are two pillars at Telfed, the Klita pillar and the social welfare pillar. So if you're talking about Klita, we have a full-time Klita advisor. You can see our numbers from last year. Last year, we had 326 Olim from South Africa. This year, we should hit the 500 mark, which will be the largest number of Olim from South Africa since 1994. You can see the Olim from Australia. Hopefully, the number will go up this year. We hit in post-corona and they've opened their borders. We also help the Olim from United Kingdom with our regional volunteers. You can see here 250 volunteers. We have 24 regional committees that help absorb the Olim throughout the country. Aviva is in charge of the volunteers and our regional committees. And we encourage our Olim to be in touch with us pre-Aliyah, so we can put them in touch with volunteers that are living in the area where they're planning to go and make Aliyah to. The more contact we have pre-Aliyah, the better we can help plan their Klita. We look forward to the days when we can meet the Olim again at the airport, post-Corona. And we are in touch with the Olim after they've arrived, once every 2 months, also from the office and also from our volunteers. If any of our listeners, if we're not in touch with you, please send your details to Aviva and we'll be happy to make contact. Lone soldiers is a major part of our work with the Klita. You can see 110 lone soldiers from South Africa and 60 from Australia, helping them before their induction while they're in the army, but mainly when they finish the army. The big challenge for lone soldiers is when they have to adapt to civilian life. We have a full-time employment advisor and a career counselor, 2 people in that department. Again, pre-Aliyah, helping people prepare for the job market, maybe even retraining in South Africa and Australia before they make Aliyah. Once they're here, preparing them for the job market in Israel with webinars and mentors. If any of you with us tonight, if you'd like to be a mentor, if you're successful in your field and you'd like to be a volunteer mentor for our Olim, please let Aviva know. We have a community awareness department. Part of that is media. The Telfed magazine that goes out twice a year, Rosh Hashanah and Pesach time. The newsletter that goes out every month to 11,000 unique addresses. Our Facebook page, 4,500 people there, and Instagram. I really recommend for those at Facebook, if you're not with us on our Facebook page, please go join us. And if you're not getting the newsletter, please let Aviva know. We're the only Ole organization that provides housing. We have 105 apartments in Tel Aviv and Ra'anana. We rent out those apartments at 25% below regular rental rates in the area. And 70% of the rentals, sorry about that, 70% of the rentals goes to help the needy. So these people that are in our apartments, so they know that the money that they're paying is going to help the needy. Aviva's in charge of our events. It's face-to-face events, can be online events like we're having tonight. And we really invite you to be a part of both our online and our face-to-face events around the country. The Social Welfare Department, we're the only organization that gives out our scholarships at the Knesset. Over 400 scholarships every year. The Prus Scholarship, our students do 3 hours of community service a week, helping us absorb Olim. If any people on the event tonight, if you'd like to apply for a Prus student to come and help you with your absorption, please let Aviva know. The Prus Scholarship gives those students 6,000 shekels a year for 3 hours of community service a week. We also have scholarships based on financial need that can go up to 4,000 shekels. So a student can get both, 10,000 shekels, which covers most of their tuition. And the SASI scholarship, which is South Africans studying in Israel, that's a scholarship for tourists that are in Israel studying that haven't yet decided whether to make Aliyah or not. And we nevertheless support them through their studies because we see that as part of Aliyah promotion if they study here for 3 years. And they also do 3 hours of community service a week through the Prus program, and they also get a 6,000 shekel scholarship. Financial assistance, it's a full-time social worker providing counseling, providing food cards, making sure that people are actually eating, that they have food to eat, that they have a roof over their head. It's 450 people every month that get financial assistance from Telfed. A lot of that money, as I said, coming from the rentals of our building. The Telfed budget is 10 million shekels a year, of which 4 million we need to fundraise every year. So if you're looking for a good place to donate, we're going to be helping our fellow Olim, a good organization that has 3 government awards for excellency. So I'd like to recommend that you make your donations to Telfed. Aviva will post on the chat how you can do that online. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank Marc once again for giving of his time, of his knowledge and expertise. Marc knows the Ole community very well. He's also traveled to South Africa numerous times. And we're really happy and thankful that we're going to be hearing from him tonight. Thank you again to Teddy and to Aviva for putting this together. And I wish everybody a wonderful evening and a Chanukah Sameach. Toda Rabba.
Thank you, Dawn. And Mark, thank you so much again for joining us. Usually when we do these events, we ask people to send us a short bio. I didn't get too much from Mark, but I did do a little research and found out the following, that we're very lucky to have Mark with us this evening. He has a BSc, an MSc in Economics, Statistics and Management, an MBA from the member Bradford Graduate School of Management, and several years of experience of banks in Israel. What he's written here, he was the head of the foreign residence and Olim activities at Bank Mizrahi, which he is at the present moment. He was also deputy manager, director for international activities, also at Mizrahi. Previously, he was at Citibank, director sales and distribution, and so on and so on. And Mark comes from a list of banks and has lots of experience in the field. He made Aliyah in 1996 and 2007. Thank you, Mark, this evening for being with us and for discussing the following topics: the importance of your bank account, mortgages, products and processes, managing a current account, foreign currency, pros and cons, credit cards, loans, investments and savings. So there you go, Mark. Thank you again. I just do want to mention that anybody who does make a presentation, that we are grateful and that people should know that it does take a fair amount of time to put the presentations together. So we appreciate it and thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Hi, good evening. First of all, can you hear me? Because I'm just using my iPad basically in the library here. Is it a good connection?
I can hear you perfectly. If anybody can't, they will message.
Okay, so basically, first of all, thank you for that kind introduction, and also from you, Doron. I don't know where you found that information. Actually, I tend not to go back. I'm quite a humble guy, but thank you very much. In any case, I have a tremendous fondness. Actually, I'll just tell me, how long do we have?
Almost an hour.
Okay, fine.
And we also need to include in that hour Q&A for the last 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, so I'll take about 25 minutes, whatever it is. It goes without saying, if anyone has any burning questions, please feel free to, I don't know how it works here. You want to just...
Well, we prefer if they send them via the chat during the presentation, they can send it. And if it's something really urgent, they can press on their space bar and ask the question.
Fine, so feel free. We'll keep this informal in any case. And
yes.
Also, what I have is I have another piece of paper on my right here, where if there's any questions that I can't answer immediately, I do guarantee that I will get back to you in the next couple of days with the answers to any questions that are asked of me tonight. So you have that guarantee from me. I do have a tremendous, but I'm assuming most people on this call are from South Africa. There's not many pictures up here or the video, so I don't really know what type of audience we have here. I'm assuming you're either recent Olim or veteran Olim. I don't know whether all of you are looking for work. I don't know whether, again, the questions will guide me. So I'll start and then we'll see where it goes, okay? It goes without saying though, also, and this as a personal, as I said, I have a personal fondness for South Africa. If anyone at a young stage has made Aliyah, is making Aliyah, and they are looking for work, you know, the bank is a big place, but we are also very well connected in many other fields, whether it's fund management, whether it's in the economic side, whether it's in venture capital, whatever it is. And I'd be very happy to receive any CVs from anyone who is looking for positions. Doron knows this for a long time now. And I can also help even in the forms of mentoring. I'll speak to Aviva about this another time, whether it's me personally or some of my staff, we'll be more than happy to do that. Anyway, let me get started. This is not about me selling the bank, but I do have to mention where I am. I do work in Mizrahi Tfachot. There are 5 large banks in Israel. We are probably the fastest growing for many reasons, and we're probably the strongest and most stable at this moment in time. But that's all you're going to hear about from Mizrahi Tfachot now. And any questions that you have which are referring to other banks, the answers are all the same. I think we'll start off by saying, what is the difference between banking in Israel and other places? For those of you who are new here. You might hear from my accent, I'm English, so predominantly my experiences with the English banks, the United States, many places in Europe. But I guess there's a lot of similarities between the South African and the European side rather than Israel. So in Israel, the fees are slightly different. The whole idea of the way the banks are managed, let me just go through the list that I prepared here before. It's very important when someone starts working in an Israeli institution that you compare apples with apples and not apples with oranges. What I mean by that is that many people, the first thing they do is they come to Israel, and it's a major source of frustration to them, their banking relationship, because often they say, what, I have pounds, I have rand, I have dollars, I'm putting it into my bank, and they're charging me even for that. And that's the very first question you often hear, which is the beginning of the misunderstanding. If you try to deposit pounds in America, or rand in England, or francs in England, or euro, when you're comparing, in other words, if you're going to put in pounds in an English bank, there's no cost. But if you're going to put in dollars or shekels in an English bank, there are. And the problem is that most people who come in Aliyah actually have a lot of foreign currency, and they're comparing the fee structures with foreign currency in a shekel environment to what they're used to at home. So that's one thing I would urge people to try and compare apples with apples. Also, the relationship that you have with your bank in Israel is probably one of the more important relationships that any Oleh Hadash or even veteran Oleh would have in Israel, aside from one's wife and children, of course. But what I mean is that it's an incredibly important relationship because the banks here pretty much are the key to everything, whether it's your salary, whether it's your pension, whether it's transferring money to and from abroad, getting help from parents, whether it's direct debits, whether it's paying rent, receiving rent, whether it's, you name it, the bank has to be involved. The fees, as I said before, are slightly different here in Israel. In Israel, it's very much commission-based. In England, for example, it's very much spread-based. So they would take very few commissions on the workings of an account, but they would take very much more significant spreads on the deposit and the interest rates that they would give. In this low interest rate environment, and also if someone wants me to talk about the economy later, I'm more than happy to, but in this low interest rate environment, it's very difficult, even for the banks abroad, to make money from the spreads, and therefore most banks have turned into more fee takers as opposed to spreads. So bear that in mind when you look at the banks here. The account in Israel and the branches are very much more advanced than you might think, and certainly from in comparison to European banks. In Israel, it's pretty much a one-stop shop. You can have one account, and in that one account, you take care of your investments. You can hold any number of currencies. It's a checking account. Your mortgage will be there. Everything goes on in one account. Certainly in the UK, you have to open up different accounts for euro, for pounds, for dollars, for rand, or whatever it might be. So in Israel, everything is in one account. There might be subsections of each account, but everything's in one account. The way deposits work here are slightly different too. You can do the usual stuff, which are 3-month rolling, 9-month rolling, a year rolling deposits. In these low interest, in this low interest rate environment, there's a lot of people who simply leave their money in Over V'Shav, in current accounts, because they need the liquidity, and it's not worth it holding their money, locking it for 6 months just for a few tenths of a percent. But having said that, there's things that you can do in Israel which you can't do anywhere else. If you have a wedding that you're saving for, or if you have a particular event that you want to take care of in a particular date, you can actually just go into the bank and say, I want to close this amount of money until the 19th of October 2023. You can actually do that. You have the flexibility here to do whatever you want in terms of depositing your money. Generally, the longer you deposit, the higher the rates. The relationship in Israel is very, very, very important, because you might be aware and familiar with this with all the various walks of life here in Israel, but the relationship is quite important, because and this is often a disadvantage for Olim Chadashim, when people grow up in the same area, they tend to know their banker. They go to their bar mitzvahs, they go to their celebrations. It's a very much more intimate relationship than you would be used to abroad. You become friends with them. that's often very useful from a business relationship too. So for example, if at the end of the month you can't make ends meet, or for a particular reason you need to invest in something, but where your source of funds is not ready at this moment and you need a bridging loan, the better that the relationship is, the more that they know you, the easier it is for them to say, you know what, we'll cover this for as long as you need, or we'll bali kratcha, as they would say in Hebrew, we'll come and meet you halfway. But it's essential that they get to know you. And that's why it's also very important when Olim Chadashim open accounts, one, do it as soon as possible. Two, try and find someone that you can really relate to. What that means is find dedicated branches where they might speak English or they might speak whatever language you feel more comfortable in. I know in Mizrahi, for example, we have 4 more private banking branches and about 16 dedicated foreign resident branches as well. And those are the type of things you'd be looking out for, because it will enhance the relationship and make your experience a lot better. As I said before, you basically can use an account here for salaries, social security, the sal klita. When people make aliyah, you get a sal klita. I know that Telfed is very involved in that too. If you have kids in school, for the direct debits from schools, for receiving money abroad, from accepting your pension from abroad. And that's why it's super important to get it sorted as soon as you get to Israel. One thing which isn't different from abroad is compliance. The world changed in the last decade, and certainly in the last 5 years. It used to be that basically there was a lot of trust going on. And even if there was no trust, the bankers would simply ask questions. And all you had to do was give an answer, and then you can basically send money into your account from anywhere in the world. The difference is today is that they don't rely on answers. They need document and documentation backup. So if someone says, for example, my source of funds that I want to send over from South Africa or from the UK or from wherever you may be is from business dealings or from the sale of a house, what they would ask for is that they would ask for a document, a contract, or something which shows, or an accountant letter, just to show the world changed and there's been a lot of financing of terrorism and of drugs and of all these type of activities, and the banks are under tremendous pressure from all the various regulatory bodies worldwide to not aid in these efforts, and therefore they have to take the area of compliance and finance and trafficking very, very seriously. And if you haven't experienced this until now, you certainly will if you want to transfer money from abroad and to receive it here. It doesn't mean they're treating you like criminals. It doesn't mean that they're giving you or not giving you the benefit of the doubt. But the expectations from the world regulatory bodies, including from South Africa, which one day could very easily come and audit any bank abroad, any bank that they have a relationship with, they'll want to see documentation. And the type of things they'll want to know is the money, is it tax compliant, what the source of funds were. And as long as there's a reasonable explanation, even if it's a simple answer, there should be no problem at all in opening an account. To open an account, to receive money, to open an account, it's very simple. As an Oleh Hadash, you come in with your Tudat Zahut and the Sefach, which is which provides a little bit more detail to the Tudat Zahut, and your Tudat Oleh. It's worth coming in with that if you do, because there are certain benefits to Olim Chadashim. There's a few tax benefits. There's a few I suppose, benefits that the banks give you. And I think there's probably some deal with Telfed lying around in the bank as well. So the more information that you give them, then you can join one of these programs where it might be more beneficial in terms of fees. The banks in Israel still use checkbooks. The checks are very prevalent here in Israel. Certainly if someone's renting a property, it's very common that they will provide you with 12 checks, and then you can deposit them either all at once and just defer them. But checkbooks are very common here. The credit cards are incredibly common here, but there is a major difference here in Israel as abroad. There is actually no such thing called a credit card here. It's a deferred debit card. What that means is that you'll use the credit card during the month and it will come off your bank account automatically on the 1st, on the 5th or the 10th or the 12th of the next month. And so in other words, the debit is simply deferred, as opposed to a credit card where I grew up in the UK, where if we had a Visa card, you could write a check and send it to the Visa company as to any payment that you want, and the interest rate will be commensurate. So here it's all directly linked to your bank account, which is another reason why it's so critically important to get that bank account right, because there's no such thing as a credit card here which is not linked to your bank account. It is a deferred debit from your bank account. The good news is with the credit cards is that they are much, much more well accepted here in Israel, rather than I still, and I'm sure many of you do too, I still, when I go into a makolet or any shop, I will apologize occasionally for using my credit card on small sums. But it's a silly thing to do, because here in Israel, you can use it even for 5 shekels buying a piece of bread, and it's perfectly acceptable. I've been to bar mitzvahs and weddings and smachot recently, where you can even give a gift at the door by your credit card. They have all these machines now where you can just swipe and you give a gift like that. So the credit cards are incredibly important here. And as I said, they're more like deferred debit cards. Let me just move on here. Fees. I'll give you a couple of important points, because instead of just hearing me out and just with some meaningless statements, let me give you some ways that you can navigate the fees which you might encounter in the banks. If you are receiving money from abroad, there are such things here as minimum fees. So in other words, if you're going to be taking money or transferring money to a family member abroad, every time you do it, it will cost a few dollars or a few shekels. And there are many people that do small amounts every month or receive small amounts every month. And that's a shame. One, because there's a minimum fee. So whether you're receiving $10 or $100, it might be the same fee. Whether you're sending $10 or $100, it will be the same fee. So find out what those minimum fees are, and then send or receive for the next 6 months or for the next year. So if people living abroad and they're supporting their children here, don't send every month, send every year or every 6 months. And that way, the fees are 6 times less automatically, because you're not going to be paying the minimum fee for each time. The same thing would apply with foreign exchange. There's many people here who don't want to change their mother currency, as it were. You come from South Africa, or you come from England, or you come from Australia, and you prefer hold the foreign currency in your account here. You might even be holding it abroad. I would strongly recommend that you reconsider that, because the world has changed actually. And the longer that you wait to bring the money here in Israel, and you lose the documentation that you need to have to show to bring the money in here into Israel. So it's obviously it's good to bring it in while you've still got everything with you. But when you're going to do foreign exchange, there's many people here who change $500, $1,000, whatever it is. And then whenever they need more, they change more. You're living in Israel, your expenses are now in Israel, most of your obligations will be in shekels. Therefore, you should consider changing larger sums less frequently than smaller sums more frequently. Therefore, the minimum fees don't kick in, and you can even invest those shekels and put it into a deposit, and the shekel interest rates are higher at the moment than most of the foreign currency. So that's something that you should consider. Also, you might be familiar with the idea of tashlumim. Wherever you go in Israel, you'll go to a supermarket, you'll use your deferred debit card, and they'll ask you how many payments. These are seriously beneficial methods of paying, because it's interest-free, and you can often pay for 6 months, 3 months, 8, whatever the institution defines. But you do have to be careful with that too, because many people, for want of a better word, get so used to that, and they just lose track of what it is that they're putting on tashlumim, which is payments. And by the time they finish their month, they've put enough payments on for the next 6 months that they forget that whatever comes in after that, it's almost all debited at the beginning of every month. So when you use these tashlumim, these debit payments, use them wisely and try and keep track of them. Okay, foreign currency. I'm going to go through this quickly, because I'll leave everything open to questions after. And I think one of the more important things you might want to hear about is mortgages, and I really do want to check that too. The foreign currency is, as I said, Israel is a shekel-based country, and most of the people here in Israel, actually, either them or their parents were foreign, may have been olim at some stage. And if not that, then most people would be either working with, working for, accepting investments from entities from abroad. So there's not many people here who don't deal with foreign currency in whatever part of their life they are. So it's a major source of competition as well, not just to banks, but there'll be other third parties that would do this too, who would want to take your foreign currency and exchange it to shekels. The only best advice I can give to you is that whenever you do it, check out several sources, but also make sure that one of those sources that you check are the banks too, because often people think that, well, the banks are so expensive, I'll only work with the third party exchanges. And sometimes it's actually better off doing it in the bank. So the only thing I would tell you is, and it's important because these things can really eat away at the hard-earned foreign currency that you have. So therefore, whenever you make some foreign exchange, remember, do it with larger amounts instead of doing it small amounts all the time. And just keep an eye on the exchange rates wherever you're offered it from, and always check one or two places. The one thing about the bank is they might never be the cheapest, but they'll never knowingly, I hope they will never knowingly screw you, not any of my guys in any case. And ultimately, they are also bound by regulations to give you the best that they can. You know, it doesn't mean it's the cheapest, but you certainly will be able to sleep at night. Another thing, many people who, especially again, as I said, in the low interest rate environment that we're having today, there are many people who might have a view on foreign currency. So I can't really speak about the rand, but I can speak about the dollar and sterling. Today, the dollar is 3.1 shekels to the dollar. In 1996, it was the same rate. The shekel has been, over the last decade or two, by far the world's strongest currency. What that means is that the shekel is super strong against almost every other currency there is. There's only been one other currency this year which is stronger than the shekel, and believe it or not, it's the Russian ruble. But other than that, the shekel, and there's many sound and good reasons for that, which should make us smile. You'll have heard of Intel buying Mobileye for $15 billion. You know, there's Waze, there's MoveIt, there's Viber, there's News Datacom, there's Playtika, there's any number of Israeli companies which are attracting billions of dollars in investment. It's that investment which at the end of the line will be transferred to shekels to pay wages and to purchase more infrastructure here in Israel and to finance the research. And all this is propping up the shekel. It's also good news if you're a young Oleh Hadash, because all of these companies are hiring like there's no tomorrow. In other words, there are many people today, and again, I won't speak of South Africa so much, but in Europe, it's a pretty miserable environment at the moment. Not just in terms of COVID, where it's at record numbers, in Germany, in Europe, even in the UK, even after the vaccinations. Yes, it's not as deadly as it was, but the numbers are high. But the employment situation is very, very, very difficult. Here in Israel, you've got a hot high-tech area, and they are employing especially people who have mother tongue languages, where it will help them sell abroad. So there's lots of opportunities here. So while the shekel is becoming stronger because of all of these inflows and investments into the country here, it's also good for people who are looking for jobs and for younger olim too. By the way, it's also good for people earning shekels. It's much, much cheaper for you to use those shekels and to go on holidays abroad. And that's another side. But where there is an opportunity, if you do come in with your pension or your savings and it's in a local and it's in foreign currency, I can't again speak too much about the rand, but I'm sure a lot of you would have dollars or whatever other currency that you may have. And you have a view on the shekel, you should ask your banker as to what you can get in terms of loans based on your foreign currency if you don't want to use it. So say, for example, I have £1,000, but I believe the pound after Brexit and after the COVID and after all of the issues that we're facing now will go up because it's at a 30-year low. So I don't want to use it now. So instead, I'll keep my pounds in a deposit and I'll get a loan based on it in shekels. And the loan is very cheap because it's in shekels and the rates are low now in any case. So these are the type of things where when you hear a banker go, we have solutions for all your needs, that's what they're talking about. Try and work out what your needs are, go in, speak to the banker, and they'll help you with those type of issues. And again, I remind you, now that you're living in Israel, and it seems that most of this audience are, most of our obligations and most of our needs are now going to be in shekels. I'm going to go back to the credit cards very quickly and loans. I told you they're a deferred debit card. When you go into the bank, there'll be many people here with different cultures. Yeah, and some of you might like opera. Some of you might like flying abroad. Some of you might like the environment and going into nature reserves. For almost all of these things, you can get a credit card which gives you reward points based on the things that you like. So, for example, I've seen one for the nature reserve stuff here, where the more you use your credit card, then you get free entrance into a lot of nature reserves. I've seen the same thing for theaters and for things like that. Ask your banker, because the chances are, whatever it is that you particularly enjoy, you can get very similar to the credit cards with air miles. If you're going to be spending a lot on your credit card and you can get a mile for every shekel that you use, then get that credit card if you enjoy flying. But if you enjoy doing other things, look into it. It's vast, the amount of credit cards and debit cards. As I said, they're all debit cards or deferred debit, but I'm using that word as a general rule. In terms of loans, as I said, for those looking to buy a car, you can get car loans, business loans, you can get an overdraft on your account. Again, all of these things you can check with your banker there. For investments and savings, actually, again, all of this is linked to the one single account that I was telling you about. And all types of deposits, whether they're linked to the inflation rate, whether they're linked to foreign currencies, whether they're foreign currency, all of it will be in one single account, which you already hold. When it comes to investments, for those that are interested in slightly more risky, but perhaps more opportunity in the longer term, there's three ways of doing it. If you believe in something and you're good enough, then you can execution only, buy, sell whatever stocks in any branch that you have. You would be able to purchase from any stock exchange around the world, and you will buy on an execution only basis your stock. Or bonds. If you feel that you don't want to do it alone, then the banks here would offer an advisory as well, where you would get an investment advisor, and they would help you make those decisions. And if you don't want to be involved at all, but you have sufficient amount of money where you really, really want to put it away for what would have to be a more longer period of time, at least a couple of years, because you don't want to take the chance in a volatile environment. And then you get some really excellent third-party providers. There's many very well-known South African providers. There's very well-known English service providers here, many global brands, and many more family-type institutions here, which will be more than happy to take your money. They will do it through your bank account as well. They will take power of attorney through part of the dedicated account that will be set up for that. And they will manage your money in the account based on your risk profile. So that's also one of the things that the banks offer here too. I think I want to take the last 5 minutes and just talk about mortgages. I'm going to go on until someone stops me, but this is actually for those who are at some stage who think that they will want to buy a property here. I'll just give you a little background onto the economy here. There are many initiatives going on at the moment from the government in order to try and bring down property prices. And you never know, at some stage, they might actually work. But what's been happening here over the last basically decade is that year on year, house prices have been going up around 9 or 10%. Since the beginning of 2019, they've gone up about 15%. And these are average prices. And the main reason for this is that the demand vastly outstrips the supply. Now, in the recent budget, the government said they're going to try and attack that and try and increase the supply, but that will take a while. Another factor which doesn't look as though it's going to be helpful in bringing prices down is that most young couples these days, certainly the research shows this, are now no longer waiting for that crash or for the downgrade in prices to occur, and they're going into the market now. So there seems to be support certainly in the near future, probably to the mid future, of prices still going up. So if someone's looking to take a mortgage now, these are the things that you've got to remember. The loan to value here as an Oleh Hadash for your first property would be 75%. In other words, they would give you 75%. All of this is based on your ability to repay. And it's an age-old adage, never take on more credit than you can afford to pay back. And again, your banker and the mortgage specialist will help you understand what that is, because the Bank of Israel has many regulations which limit the bank, and there's no competition on this. So for example, the Bank of Israel defines that the maximum amount that anyone can pay back for their mortgage here in Israel is up to 40% of their total global net income. So just for the sake of ease, if you're earning $10,000, whether it's coming from a wage, a pension, a investment portfolio returns, a coupon from a bond, some trust income or whatever it is, all of that goes together. They'll make it onto a monthly basis and 40% of that is the maximum that you can pay back for a mortgage. Often that's what defines the budget that people can buy. And this is actually a critical point. There's many people, especially from our communities, that would come here and they are very, very affluent in terms of long-term holdings. They might have a property abroad, they might have a property portfolio, but if they don't have a wage, they can't get a mortgage. You can only get a mortgage here with a fixed wage. And the loan to value on that is 75%. If you buy a second apartment, it will be 50%. If you buy as a foreign resident, it's also maximum 50%. In Israel, it's a very, very simple program. You have to have at least 1/3 fixed rates and 2/3 variable rates. And what's the significance of that? The fixed rates are more expensive. They're still low today, but they're vastly more expensive or significantly more expensive than the variable rates. But then you lock in the interest for the next 25 years. So even if the rates go up, which it looks like in the coming years, because we're seeing inflation starting to go up, it looks like that will be the case. So some people take more than the minimum needed, which is 33% of the mortgage. But in general, 1/3 has to be fixed and 2/3 is a form of variable rates. Another part to remember for the mortgage, especially if you're holding money abroad, do not sign any contract here until you have your capital needed in Israel to purchase that flat for your own. In Israel, in Hebrew, you'll call it the hon atzmi, your own capital that you'll need to put in upfront for your part of the purchase. Because as I said, sometimes the banks in Israel will give you trouble accepting that money if the documentation isn't backing it up. So you might have all the money in the world abroad, but if you can't get it here, don't commit on a contract until the money is here in any case. That's a general law that we've seen over the last years, which is really, really helpful. A banker or a lawyer will help you check the property deed and the property title. Those are essential things here. It goes without saying that we would recommend a lawyer, and it's almost unheard of to buy a property without a lawyer here, but they are essential for the part of the deal here. I've told you that the Bank of Israel defines the ability to repay at 40% of your global income. In Israel, it's important. Everyone that takes a mortgage must have life insurance. Now, that is often a bone of contention with many Olim Chadashim and many foreign residents because they'll say abroad they don't have it. I used to be like that. I promise you this. The first time you see someone, especially when it's an elderly person, whether it's a widow or a spinster or a widower, and the partner, something unfortunate happens to the partner, they lose their job or even worse, they die. Instead of reclaiming a house, the life insurance kicks in. I have seen it myself where it saves. We have letters of thanks for the people who say, thank you for making us take the life insurance. I know it's often seen as something which is an additional burden, but we don't see it like that. And it's probably the most responsible thing to do from a banking perspective, where the bank, the very last thing it wants to do is to retake a property. That's in addition to the property insurance, which is important. The duration of a mortgage here is up to 25 years. It can be expected to 30 years or until the age of 18, whichever one comes first. The process here is very simple. You'll get an approval in principle within 3 days. And after that, you start working out and looking at which property you want, because the approval in principle will give you, again, an idea of the budget that you can take. The fees that you'll be looking at, most mortgage institutions will have a fee to start the whole process. It'll be a maximum of 5,000 shekels, but these things are often negotiable and can often be much less than that. But it will be a certain small percentage of the deal. The legal fees are roughly around 0.5% to 1%, depending on what type of lawyer you're using. And the real estate agents can take anything between 1% and 2%. The purchase tax here in Israel has been, because of Corona the last couple of years, was down to 5%. Yeah, if you're buying the first place as an Oleh Hadash, it could be just 3.5%. But if you're buying as a foreign resident or a second property, it's about to go up to 8% too. Now, I've gone through that pretty quickly, and I'm aware of the time now, and I promised to leave things for questions. So I'm going to see if there are any questions and stop there.
Thank you, Mark. Let's hear from the audience if they have any questions. In the meantime, there haven't been any questions in the chat, but people are welcome to share their cameras and ask the questions. And if you just want to ask the question without sharing the camera, that's also okay. Any questions? Well, in the meantime,
Mark.
Yeah.
Hi, sorry, this is Daniel. Hi, my name is Daniel Weiner. I've just got a crying baby here, so I hope she doesn't disturb too much. Thank you very much for your time and for all of the information. I'm going to ask a question which maybe is not maybe a fixed answer, but I would maybe just like to hear your speculation. With regards to buying a property, would there be any benefit? Should one's approach be to just try enter the market as soon as possible, considering the increase of the prices over the last couple of years, or would you maybe speculate that one should maybe hold on, carry on renting, build up your down payment, and just maybe wait a little bit? So basically, is this a market someone wanting to buy a property should enter as quickly as possible? Or should they, carry on renting, keep on saving, and maybe hope for the prices to go down?
Okay, first of all, Daniel, thank you for that question. Again, my answer would be as valid as anyone else on this call who can give an opinion. It's only my opinion, but I will back it up with evidence where possible. So, for example, the research has shown in the last couple of years that young couples are no longer waiting for that crash. They're no longer waiting for it. They've been promised it. And I can tell you this from abroad, certainly from the UK, where for years people have been saying, wow, the property has gone mad, it's gone mad, it's gone mad, therefore I'm not going to buy now. So history has shown us that it never really seems to be a bad time to buy property. But the biggest advice that I would give you here is to never let the tail wag the dog. What that means is it really does depend on what your needs are. There are very strong and legitimate reasons to rent. For especially as an Oleh Hadash, you might not be sure where you want to live. You might not be sure if the community is right for you. You might not be sure as to the type of place you want to live in. So, for example, here in Israel, this always makes me laugh. There's certain definitions that you have that I'm used to from abroad, which are used here in Israel, but don't mean the same thing. A cottage where I grew up, was a nice, stone-built house with a nice river flowing at the bottom of the garden. Here, a cottage is a semi-detached house in a nice yeshuv. The amount of bedrooms you might want to buy in a growing community where there's lots of young people with also young children like you. You probably aren't capable of making those decisions in the first couple of years. A question that would follow that is it still better to buy? Now, I happen to know a lot of South Africans were investing in recent years in a place called Harish, and especially a lot of younger South Africans, because that was a place where it's easy to rent, it gets them on the property ladder, and at the very least, that could help pay off their mortgage, and when they are ready to buy, then they would sell that and buy elsewhere. So the answer to that question is actually, it really depends on what your particular needs and stage in life is. I think history has shown that it's just never worth trying to time the market. And if I told you now that certainly the housing starts, in other words, the amount of houses being built are vastly underperforming the amount of people trying to buy houses. In other words, the growth of the population who are every year looking to buy a house, as it were. So all the economic pointers are that it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Might there be a crash? God forbid, if there's a missile coming over from Iran at any one stage, who knows what that will do to the property market. But are you going to base your decisions on things like that, which even then, if you look at any long-term graph, are often recovered within a very, very short time after any immediate crash? So my answer to you would be, I don't think I know anyone who has ever regretted buying a property. Yeah. And especially if they're going to be living with it, because you're not buying it as an investment, you're buying it because it suits your needs. So Darren, I'm sorry that's a bit of a long winding answer, But I don't think you'd regret it if you did buy. But there are certainly reasons to especially with a young family, before you're sure where you want to live, to keep renting for a while.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate it.
Hi, Mark. Can I ask a question, please?
If I said no to that, what am I doing here?
You mentioned the pound. It's sliding and sliding. At some point, we need to bite the bullet and move some money over. Have you got any views on the medium to long term movement of the pound?
I do, but it will be very difficult for you to hear my answer because the tears, will be covering my voice.
Wrong answer.
You see, I'll answer it with this. When Brexit was announced, and the pound crashed from about 5.5 to under 5 to 4.9, 4.8. The truth is, even then we were saying, that's it. It's not going down any lower than this. There are only, and I'm sorry, but on your screen here it says Amanda, but you're obviously not Amanda, but Amanda. Well, Mr. Amanda, there's only two types of people that I know, when it comes to currency speculation. There are those that don't know what's going to happen, and there are those that don't know that they don't know what's going to happen. In other words, no matter what someone tells you, no one knows. And again, it's the same principle. You've got to look at what your needs are, and you've got to not let the tail wag that dog. So in other words, if you need something now, or what you could do is, as I said before, there are the opportunities. Bring that money over, put it into a deposit, use it as a collateral for a lower loan. It won't be a mortgage. That won't work with a mortgage. With a mortgage, it will be a house. By the way, take a mortgage. Mortgage yourself out. I'm not selling you the mortgage, believe me. I'm just telling you these are options. Rates are low. If you believe that the pound will go up in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, then you shouldn't be using your pounds, but you should use it. You should leverage it off it, as it were. Look, 4.2 is a very, very, very low figure. If we believe that Brexit is at its worst now, if we believe that the economy of the UK is at its worst now, if we believe that it's also the winter where things are generally pretty miserable in any case, and if any one of these things could change in the next year, if you have a view on that and it suits your lifestyle, then you should act that. Always the best way is to sort of take a portion of it, and just bite the bullet. And in other words, don't risk everything on your view. And you should, but you can't know whether it's going to go to 3.6. I'll tell you this, which is a nightmare scenario. I was learning with someone from the Bank of Israel the other day on the dollar. The dollar is 3.1 today, which is where it was in 1996. Maybe it's a worst case scenario, but there are people that believe it could go down to 2.6, 2.7, 2.8. I mean, these are crazy figures. And it's not just because the dollar or the pound is low. It's because the shekel is hot at the moment. And it's just hot. So, if you have, any number of new high-tech companies, getting very large investments, the shekel will react accordingly. So it's a difficult situation to be in. All I'll remind you is if you have the assets there, try and remember that it's a nice problem to have.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's what I thought you'd say, but thank you anyway.
Does anybody else have a question for Mark? So in the meantime, I'll ask you, Mark, what about the new chatter about online banks, not physical banks? Can you share a bit about that, or do you think it's not an industry that's...
Well, I'll separate that into two, actually, because you've got, first of all, if you don't mind, I'll mention the cryptocurrencies, because the cryptocurrencies is actually in some ways a form of online banking. Now, I've seen two things in the past couple of weeks which are interesting from that respect. China recently announced that they're sort of getting out of it, which was a big hit, actually. And then you could see that. In other words, it's not stable just yet. But I don't think there's any doubt that within the next 5 or 10 years, it's sort of obviously going to catch on at some stage, it seems to me. But it seems like it's a very, very risky play at the moment. Not necessarily because it's not going to go up in the longer term, but because it'd be so volatile, not everyone can deal with that type of volatility. So, it's like, for example, many people forget, if someone buys insurance and nothing happens to you during the year, you don't consider like you've lost your money. But if you buy an option, or if you buy something as a hedge and you lose all that money, many people see that they've lost all the money of their investment. Cryptocurrency isn't quite like that. And at the moment, it's frowned upon within all the regulatory authorities. So at this moment in time, the regulatory authorities are not necessarily supporting that type of activity. So until then, it's still very risky. In terms of the online banking, listen, in the UK, it's a big success. In the UK, many people have online banks, and they're pretty good. Here in Israel, it hasn't really taken off. There are a lot of people, actually, that are investing in this type of business at the moment now. But it's sort of anyone's guess, because it has to be that the regulatory authorities support that. That is not a simple thing, because the banks in Israel are the most regulated industry. They are certainly not going to give over to new unregulated industries, as it were. The heavy responsibility. Remember, the banks, I didn't mention, but we are monitored from FATCA, from CRS, from all of the various issues that there are. And they're not going to suddenly allow, other players to come in and bypass that. Once they're under the same restrictions as the banks, one assumes that the pricing will change too, and therefore it'll probably meet somewhere halfway. So I say it's very early to guess which way it's going right now, but there would be no doubt, by the way, that all of the major high street banks here in Israel have a form of online banking. I know that we do. Mizrahi Tfachot, by the way, promotes themselves and certainly markets themselves as the technology does not replace the worker. The technology will bring you closer to the worker. And that's often essential for foreign residents and Olim Chadashim. Again, I can't stress the importance of the relationship with a banker here in Israel is critical. It will help in times of need. It will help when people will actually need something. And it will also help just to enhance the whole experience. So will the online banking grow? I have no doubt that the world trend is yes, but we're not quite there yet, certainly not in Israel.
Okay, guys, does anybody else have a question for Marc? There was one question in the chat, and it was, what's the best way to transfer money? Yes, but honestly, I think it's a general question, so just a general answer.
No, I will relate to that, because there are certain red lines. Again, what I would say to you and anyone there, if anyone has any further questions, because not everyone wants to get up and show themselves and ask questions, especially when it comes to finances, yeah. But feel free to send questions, whether it's via you or via Doron. You can send them to me. I have a team here. We can answer. We can get in contact with anybody. So I offer that service to you as well at a very, very fair price too. But the point is, the best way to transfer money from abroad is very simple. From your account abroad to a named account here in Israel. The red lights for banks all around the world, or where it is, the more it diverts from that simple transaction. So for example, if someone has an offshore trust in an offshore area, it doesn't mean it's illegal, not at all. But it certainly means that the level of compliance is a level higher. They'll want to understand who the beneficiaries are. They'll want to understand who really owns that money. They'll want to understand who is the people, say for example, that anyone on this call has a pension. Now the pension might be a company pension, and it's due to the person living here now. But they will have to show the connection between that pension, unless they transfer from the pension in the UK to their personal account in the UK, and then transfer from that personal account in the UK to their personal account here. That's the easiest form. It doesn't mean it's illegal doing it the other way. It just means the level of compliance here for the new relationship that you're building is going to be that much harder. So bank transfers for sure is the way through, as far as I'm concerned, because it's the safest way away. And again, I would really say at the same time now, and again, I have no vested interest here, but because of that compliance, if there are reasons and anything for you to invest in, or you have children to support here, or there's any particular, you should consider putting more of your money here in Israel while you've got all that documentation, because it gets harder as the years go by. And this isn't just Israel, it's everywhere. So in other words, it's not as though it's easier anywhere else.
Thanks, Mark. I think that kind of wraps that up. If anybody else does have a question, please feel free to send the question via Aviva. She will pass it on to Mark. In a minute, she'll put up her email on the chat. And if there are any questions, you're welcome to send it to Aviva and she will share it with Mark. Again, Mark, thank you.
Can I say one more thing? Aviva, because I can see you now, we've spoken, I don't know what you look like till now. I reiterated what I said before. This is not a job offer, but there's a lot of people here who, as Olim Chadashim in my bank, have it in their genes, in their very DNA, to want to help other Olim Chadashim. So whether it is that there's people here who would be looking for work, or whether they want advice, or whether they want help building a CV, or whether they want help dealing with other, whatever it is that you feel free to ask us. You can certainly feel free to ask me, and we'll do our best to try and help you there too.
Thank you so much, Mark, for all your advice and for giving us of your time this evening and your wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And like we said, feel free to reach out to me and I'll give you Mark's details. And also if there's any other questions, you all have my email address. So thank you so much again, Mark, and thank you everybody for joining. And the recording will also be available on Telfed's YouTube channel, Telfed Israel. And thanks again. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, again. And before you go, I just wanted to remind you about upcoming events. First of all, we don't have any events until after Hanukkah, and our next event will be on the 28th of December, an extremely, extremely interesting topic on art and Alzheimer's. And if you're interested in that, please check the Telfed website and join us for that event. In the meantime, I wish you all a good evening and thank you for joining and good health to you all. Bye for the moment.